Hello, my name is Richard Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Texture Capital. We're a FINRA member and SEC registered broker-dealer specializing in digital asset securities. We help our clients more efficiently and directly participate in private markets by providing tools for tokenization, issuance, and secondary market trading. Thank you for joining me on this special investment webinar where I will be talking to Gregg Castano, the founder and CEO of NewsDirect, and discussing how he plans to disrupt the decades-old newswire industry. Gregg is the former longtime president of BusinessWire and has leveraged his unique perspective and insight to create a brand new purpose-built platform for news distribution and assembled a first-class team to help him build it. NewsDirect is an advanced news and content distribution service specifically designed to meet the demands of modern media outreach. Built from the ground up, NewsDirect delivers a completely reimagined workflow, revitalized measurement for dynamic, efficient, and flexible distribution service. We announced last week that NewsDirect is now conducting their Series A round, which is available for investment on the Texture platform at texture.capital/invest. However, please note, everyone, that an investment in private securities is speculative, involves a high degree of risk, and may result in the loss of your entire capital contribution. Potential investors are strongly advised to consult their legal, tax, and financial advisors before investing. So let's get into it, Gregg. Welcome. Thank you for joining me on this webinar. Tell me a bit about your experience in the Newswire's business and how it led you to found NewsDirect.
Sure. Well, I started with BusinessWire way back in 1985. And for the most part, I was early on in my career, I was in the sales area. I worked my way up through sales and into sales management, and then eventually into senior management. I was when the company was purchased by Berkshire Hathaway in 2006. I became the chief operating officer, and then in 2009 I was named the president of the company, and I remained in that position until May of 2017. It was really during that last part of my career there as president that coincided sort of with the digital revolution, if you will. And essentially, I felt as though that the combination of the resources that we would have at our disposal from Berkshire, as well as the new technology that was available to us, because the business by that point had become very commoditized. The major wire services, which at the time and still consist of BusinessWire, PR Newswire, and Globe Newswire, essentially offered the same product, the same process, the same workflow, same pricing, et cetera. And it really became commoditized to the point where it became a pricing game. And I felt as though that the technology that was available would have enabled us to really kind of expand our capabilities and improve the user experience and transform the pricing model in a way that would have set us apart. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that accomplished while I was at BusinessWire. So when I left there in 2017, I took a year off and I gave a lot of thought to what I wanted to do in terms of the transformation of this industry. And I came up with a plan that I started to implement in early 2019. Part of what helped me to do this kind of in an accelerated manner was that I was able to secure the services as my chief technology officer of BusinessWire's former chief technology officer, who became who became their CTO after I departed BusinessWire. And he was there for a couple of years, and he left there. And a year later, he was free. And right at that time is when I started NewsDirect. So I was able to kind of get someone who had a very in-depth knowledge of the way things were, but also a vision of the way things should be and the way that they could be. And we were very much in sync on that. So I was fortunate that he was available. And together we sort of created this sort of new model for the newswire industry. And to put it very kind of succinctly, it really was taking a service model, a traditional service model, and transforming it into a SaaS model. And in doing that, it enabled us to accomplish a number of things that I felt were customer pain points for a long time. One was we automated the entire process. So there was very little need for editorial, if you will, intervention to process content. So that accelerated the process and turned it from a process that took, at least an hour or more to distribute a press release to something that took 5 or 10 minutes. It also made it much more secure because it wasn't necessary to share content that was, in the case of public companies, pre-market content with an outside newswire editor, which even now, of course, they're working from home, which makes it even that much more of a risk from a security standpoint. So we eliminated those two kind of obstacles that people were facing in using a newswire service. We also made it much more efficient in the sense that you could collaborate directly on the platform for people to review and comment on and approve content rather than having that content sort of being sent around via emails and in a very disorganized and insecure way. And then we also, one of the kind of the founding premises of NewsDirect was really in relation to how the world was changing. And that was the ability for us to send multimedia content downstream to the same places that people are sending news releases, but without the need to embed those assets into a text-based press release. The traditional wires are able to send multimedia assets, but it's necessary from a technological standpoint for them to embed them in a text-based press release. So we eliminated that restriction. So now content can be sent without the text-based press release, and you can send a video or an infographic or an image or a podcast, whatever it is, downstream to the same points as you can a press release. And why that's important, number one is public relations people, the industry itself is now getting much more heavily into content creation versus communicating via text-based means such as press releases. And it also, probably more importantly, it allows NewsDirect to enter into the content marketing arena, which is a exponentially larger addressable market than the newswire space. The newswire space is about an $800 million global total addressable market, whereas the content marketing space, and specifically the B2B content marketing space, is a $50 billion industry right now and projected to grow and double by 2025. So our ability to send that kind of content without the need for a press release exposes our services to corporations that are now getting very, very heavily into content marketing and creating, content on their own that they need to distribute. So that's kind of what our strategy is to acquire a tremendous amount of market share within the newswire space, but also expand into what we feel is a greenfield opportunity and a much bigger opportunity from a revenue standpoint into content marketing.
Okay, well, we covered a lot of stuff there. I'd like to kind of break it down a little bit. So a few things you mentioned there. I want to kind of talk about why the legacy incumbents are so ripe for disruption, some of the kind of antiquated processes that they have that you've resolved. Like you said just now, it takes an hour to kind of get the press release to go out or something. I know from my experience, sometimes when I've done press releases, you want to change you want to change a sentence or a word or something. They need 24 hours notice or something to do that. How is your system different?
Okay, well, let me just briefly and quickly tell you how it has worked traditionally. Essentially, the way it has worked for the traditional wires is that you upload your press release to their platform. When you then have to call them and confirm receipt. Once they've confirmed receipt, they assign it to what they consider to be an editor who actually doesn't do any actual editing, it's more processing. And essentially, they don't download that content onto their platform. Instead, what they do is they copy and paste it from what you've uploaded onto their editorial system. And in doing that, it causes most of the formatting that you've spent a lot of time doing on your end to disappear. So they have to reformat it. They have to re-justify paragraphs, have to re-justify tables. They have to put the links back in, all the bold and underlining, and all that stuff has to be reformatted, and that takes some time. Additionally, when you choose your distribution from a geographic basis, they have to code it to go to those places. So they then pull up a set of codes that allows them to designate where it's going to go. All of that obviously takes time. In our case, what we've done is we've developed a method in which you start with your original document, for example, as a Word document, you simply copy and paste it onto our editorial platform. All of the formatting is retained, and therefore there's no editorial intervention that's necessary. At that point, there's no changes that need to be made. Everything that was on your original document is now on the platform. So that eliminates that. In terms of the coding for distribution, when you go to the next screen, after you've uploaded your content, you basically just point and click at what you want. Without all the coding has been done in the background, and there's no human intervention needed for that. That's not to say we don't have humans at the ready. We have a live chat function right on every screen in the platform. You can call us as well. You can Zoom us, whatever you want. So we're available to help you through the process if you need help. But because of the fact that the copy and pasting retains all the formatting, and it's a point and click function to decide your distribution, rather than taking 45, 60 minutes or more for that content to be processed, it takes about 5 minutes or so to be done. And you can either schedule for a future distribution, or you can send it out immediately right then and there, and the process is over with, and it's much faster.
Yeah, I mean, I've used the platform a couple of times now, and I don't have a lot of experience with the other wire services, but it works exactly how I expect it to work. It's kind of like just sending an email. You write it, you compose it in the editor, and you hit send, and it's out there. We've got a question coming in here from the audience. Talk about the pricing model and how that's differentiated. Are there different tiers for levels of service?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to really fix from the old way of doing things was the complexity of the pricing. If anyone has ever used a newswire service, they know that you're getting charged on a number of levels, which makes it difficult to predict what your cost is going to be. So essentially what they do is, if you, for example, let's take a domestic US distribution as an example. Essentially, you choose a geographic region. So you can choose national, you can choose metro areas, you choose individual states, you can choose regions such as Northeast or Southeast, et cetera. And your base price is based specifically on that geographic footprint that you choose. So obviously national will be the most expensive, and down to the local areas will be the least expensive. And that can range from $450 up to $900 for the first 400 words of your press release. All right, so that's the first level that you're looking at. Then, as I mentioned, they charge you on a word count basis as well. So for each additional 100 words after the first 400 words, you're upcharged approximately 1/3 of the base price. So for example, if your first 400 words were $600, each additional 100 words will be somewhere around $200. So the longer your press release is, the more expensive it becomes. What complicates that even further is that in many cases, the editors on the other end at the newswires, they add keywords for SEO purposes. And those keywords count as part of your word count. And as a result, you might have a nice, you might do a word count on your end that says, oh, I have 398 words here. But once they add the keywords, it might be 420 words, and all of a sudden you're up to the next pricing level. So it's not quite as transparent as it should be. Additionally, on an international level, the third level of pricing is when you do translations, right? So translations are also charged on a word count basis, usually somewhere around 20 cents a word. So you can do the math on how, the longer your press release gets, the more expensive it gets, particularly in multiple languages. So we've made everything a flat rate, right? So that as you said, as you can see, it took me 5 minutes just to explain that, right? So in our case, I can do it in 10 seconds. Essentially, we charge you based on assets, right? So a press release, photo, video, and infographic, each of those is considered one asset. Each asset is a flat rate of $550, regardless of the geographic distribution that you choose, and regardless of how long the press release is. If you're sending out more than one asset within a single distribution, so for example, you're sending out a press release with a photo, each additional asset in that same distribution is half an asset, so $275. So it's very easy, predictable, transparent. You know exactly what you're paying before you go.
Yeah, I was thinking as you're going through the whole word count, and this is how, and they get you with the overage charges. It reminds me of like whenever it was, 10 years ago when the mobile phone companies would charge you for the minutes, and then you get the rollover minutes and the text messages, and everyone hated it. And eventually they realized it's a terrible business model, and they went to kind of more flat rate pricing, which is what you've already done. And just to break it down, and just to break it down even more for the audience, to put some numbers on it. Like I said, we're a client of yours. And I think, you know, in the past we've done a press release. It cost us something like $2,000, whereas what we did on your platform was $550. That's a meaningful difference. I'll do a lot more press releases at that price than I will, you know, at that higher level. So I think you found a good sweet spot in the market.
I'd also add from this perspective of putting out an earnings release, right? There's a couple of things there that are very important. Number one is earnings releases normally are much longer than, you know, standard releases, right? And the larger your company, the longer your earnings, and that can be very expensive, right? Because you're getting into, you know, maybe 8, 10, 12, 15 pages, many of which are tables, which is an interesting thing also because tables are made up of numbers. So how do you count words based on numbers, right? So essentially what the wire services do is they count the spaces between the numbers as words. So essentially, in effect, you're paying for empty spaces, right?
That's funny.
So it really kind of escalates the costs, right? In our case, you could have a 20-page earnings release sent out nationally, and it's going to cost you $550. The other thing is that if anyone's ever tried to copy and paste an Excel table onto something else, like a Word file, you know that the result is not very pretty, right? What we've been able to do, our technologists have been able to do, is figure out how to transfer that content from an Excel file onto our platform without losing any formatting. As a result of that, essentially what happens is you save your entire document, including the tables, as a Word document. You copy and paste it onto our platform. All the format is retained. So instead of the traditional way of doing it, where the editors at a newswire service would literally take hours to reformat that and then send it back to the customer for proofreading to make sure they did it right. And usually that takes several rounds of proofreading. That takes hours. In our case, you can get your earnings uploaded and ready to go within 10 minutes. So it's a huge advantage from a time perspective, as well as from a cost perspective.
The power of technology here. A couple more questions I'm going to kind of combine. Who are your competitors and what are the barriers to entry in the newswire industry?
Okay, well, our primary competitors right now are PR Newswire, which is the largest and oldest newswire service. They're owned by a company called Cision, which in turn is owned by a private equity firm. Business Wire is the second largest. They're about half as big in terms of revenue as PR Newswire. They are owned, as I mentioned, by Berkshire Hathaway. And the third largest player, and these are kind of the three primary players, is Globe Newswire, which is owned by Notified, which is also owned by a private equity firm. And so the barriers to entry, I mean, I would say for them, there are obviously already in the business, so they don't have a barrier to entry, but the barrier for them to doing what we're doing is really financial, because everything that we're doing would require not only a complete change of their business model and a complete revamp of their technology, but also it would require them to change their pricing model. And as I mentioned, the word count model, that's the gravy train for them. That is the secret sauce that allows them to have high revenues and high margins over the last 70 years. They're very, very reluctant to change that or kind of mess with it in any way. If they were to transform their model into what we're doing, by necessity, they would have to go to a different pricing model, which I've tried to do it when I was at Business Wire, to go to a flat rate model, and it's almost impossible to do without eviscerating your revenues.
They're cannibalizing the business that way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So they've kind of painted themselves into a corner with that kind of pricing model. In terms of other, non-wire services coming into the business, it's not as easy as it might sound. It's not a matter of just writing a check, right? It's essentially there are a couple of things you have to have that are very difficult to have. One is you have to know about how a wire service operates, right? You have to have sort of the insight and the knowledge of what the customers want, how they want it, and what they're trying to accomplish. More importantly, from a distribution standpoint, you can't just set up a distribution network that replicates what Business Wire, PR Newswire, and NewsDirect app. The reason for that is that this is not a matter of going directly to all the different endpoints and having a direct feed, because that would take you years to accomplish, right? So essentially the way we all work is that we work through third parties. So when you want to go to all the newspapers in the country and radio, TV stations, you use the Associated Press's network, right? And you pay them for that privilege, and they don't just take anybody off the street that has a nice checkbook onto their network. They have to know who you are, they trust who you are, have to have a history with them, and it kind of have to be accepted into the club, if you will. And it's very difficult for someone that hasn't been in the business to get that sort of acceptance, no matter how much money they're willing to pay. The same holds true for reaching all the various websites and so forth. We reach almost 300 different websites that post our content, and those are reached through aggregators that send that content. And again, it's the same type of situation. You have to have a relationship with those aggregators for them to allow you onto their platform. And then Yahoo Finance, as an individual example, is a direct fee. We do have a direct fee into them, as do the other wires, and they also will not just take anyone, right? It's very difficult to get access to their platform, and we were able to do it because of our background, myself and a number of other individuals in our company, because of our prior background and relationships with those entities. So those are really the barrier to entry from an outsider's perspective.
And so you have the same reach as these competitors. There's no difference.
Absolutely identical. Yes.
Great. Okay.
I would also mention that our platform itself, it's very different, right? It's a SaaS model versus a service model. So for anyone to replicate that would be a heavy lift, because essentially it's custom software. So it's kind of like a fingerprint, right? It's very unique. It's impossible to replicate unless you got access to our code, which obviously we can give you. So someone would have to kind of reinvent what we've already done, and that's not easy to do unless you have an extreme amount of internal knowledge and kind of as we had in our case. We were very fortunate. We had a CTO of a newswire service that knew exactly kind of where all the values were buried, and more knowing what to do is knowing what not to do, and we kind of did that. We did a lot of here's what not to do, and we went on that basis.
We want to get into some of the numbers because this is an impressive part of the story. My screen's showing, right? It should be.
Yes.
Look at these numbers here. So we're looking at, I guess 2021 was your first full year of operations, and we're looking at year-over-year growth of about 200%. Congratulations! Obviously, a great growth story here. What's the secret of your success? What's your go-to-market strategy here?
Well, essentially, we really focused on we didn't focus on the price, first of all. That was kind of, we always looked at that as, that's sort of like the cherry on the top, right? That, in addition to having all this efficiency and all that and security, it also costs you, right? So it was kind of like, that was what we closed with that, right? We didn't use it. However, really what has driven our success is people seeing how the platform works. When we show them a demo, we have an extremely high close rate because it's so drastically different from what people have been used to in terms of how the system works, how easy it is, how much control the user has, how much security is involved, and how fast it is. So that really has driven our success, and really it's part of the use of the funds here as we raise this money is going to obviously to raise awareness to a higher level than we have now, but also to drive demos, because as we drive those demos, our revenues continue to skyrocket. And the other part of our strategy is that we have an API, a custom API that allows our user interface to be integrated into other SaaS platforms that are synergistic with our platform. So for example, we have a partnership with a company called Agility PR Solutions, which is a media database. And essentially they're reselling news direct distribution to their customer base of 2,000 or so companies. And they're right now, they're our biggest user individually. They're spending, $250,000, $300,000 a year just for that one entity. And we have several others like that. We have another relationship with a company called Investis Digital, which is a web hosting platform. And again, what that allows us to do is have their sales team resell our distribution at virtually no cost to us other than a revenue share. So that helps us kind of expand our sales reach without adding to our own cost. So the cost of sale on that is very, very low. And then we just have a really good sales team. They're initially We hired a lot of ex-wire service people that had a lot of contacts, and that helped us get off the ground quickly. But as I said before, as we've evolved, it really has become more about being able to get to view the demo. And once we do that, the sale is, the kind of it sells itself. And that's really driven our growth, is just the actual the use of the platform itself and the practicality of it, and the kind of the user experience that's really drastically different from what people have been used to.
Yeah. So if somebody wants a demo, how do they get one?
Go to our website, newsdirect.com. There's a little demo button there. Just click that and sign up, and you'll be contacted virtually within 30 seconds or so. And you'll set up a demo, and it's a very thorough, and most people are quite impressed with how easy it is to use.
Yeah. We're going to be wrapping it up soon. I got a couple more questions for Greg. If there's any more from the audience, put them in now. I want to kind of go back to the opportunity. You mentioned there's, I think, what you're focusing on now is the press release business. What's the size of that opportunity there?
And that total addressable market on a global basis is about $800 million, primarily via the three main services that I mentioned before. Those make up probably 75% of that $800 million, if not more. So that's the initial addressable market that we're attacking and have been attacking for the last year and a half. Within that market,
you're thinking,
I'm sorry,
you're going to go into the content marketing part of it?
Yes, just getting that. So there's kind of a transition, right? So from there, there's, as people may know, content marketing is really sort of the marriage of PR and marketing. And it's really just based on the digital capabilities that are now available. So, what's happened is PR people have sort of transformed into marketing people because they're creating content versus writing content. They're creating visual and auditory and sensory based content, and that's what grabs people's attention now. If anyone has teenagers as children, they'll know that most of them don't read very much. They look at videos and all that kind of thing. So that's the way the world is working now. So that's what content marketing is all about, right? It's promoting a brand through brand experiences like video and infographics and things like that. So that market is, as I mentioned before, the entire market for content marketing is somewhere around $450 billion. Our kind of little section of that is kind of that we can address is still a very large number. It's $50 billion and projected to grow to $100 billion within 2 years. And that's the B2B section of the market, right? And as an example, we're talking, for example, to a very large international stock exchange that is encouraging their listed companies to create short form video for investors to view on their site. And as they're creating that and posting them on site, they also want to distribute them over NewsDirect. We're talking to another very large brand that does a lot of content marketing about doing this similar thing. There's a very large, which I won't name by name, but there's a very large investment financial website that most of you probably would be familiar with, that is also talking to us very seriously about distributing content that's produced by their customers that post content on their site over our network for content marketing purposes. So that's a very, very big kind of greenfield opportunity for us that can represent, I think that the newswire space, we can get into the tens of millions of dollars in revenue, but once we get into the content marketing space, we're getting into the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's
exciting. And so for the content marketing, instead of the endpoints being journalists and newspapers and so forth, it would be other businesses.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it would sort of depend on the issuer of that content, but yes, it could be shareholders, potential shareholders, could be customers from a business perspective, business to business customers. So it's really about creating awareness of a brand more so than communicating specific pieces of information like a new product or something like that. It's really creating a brand image and a brand reputation and a brand sort of feel. And that's what the content in content marketing is all about.
Great. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up here. It's at the half-hour mark. Thank you so much for Greg for participating in this. Thank you for the audience. There will be a recording available. As Greg said, go to newsdirect.com if you want to have a demo. If you're interested in learning more about this investment opportunity, please go to texture.capital/invest and you'll be able to sign up, or you can reach out directly if you know me, and I'll send you a copy of their deck and so forth. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, Richard.
The foregoing discussion is for information purposes only and does not constitute a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Private securities offerings are not registered with the SEC and are considered highly speculative. An investment in private securities may result in the loss of your entire capital contribution. Blockchain is a new technology and unproven in financial markets. There is no guarantee that tokenization will enable any secondary market liquidity in the future, and your investment may remain illiquid.